Hey, good to see you all. I'm glad you're here. I mean, welcome, really. I'm glad you're here. Means a lot to me. I'm Marisol or Mari, depending on how you know me. Some of you even call me by my childhood name, but I'm not going to go into that. I think I'm still Marisol on the YouTube channel. I need to rename that. I haven't done it yet. So, a couple of brief statements that I'd like to make. One is the YouTube thing, you know, share, subscribe, like, please spread it all over. I really want this channel to grow. I also want to start getting some feedback to see if I'm on the right track. So comments are always welcome. I will, however, put a limit on disrespect and bullying, shaming, all of that. So anyway, what I'm doing today, let's get started with the episode. Today, I want to delve into stress and anxiety management techniques and how to apply them or how they might come up in the context of the Enfield Poltergeist case, which is one of our more documented cases that we've got in the paranormal world. What I want to do is explore how stress, anxiety, and fear affected this case and maybe share some ideas on how to deal with those emotions, those really big emotions. So the Enfield case, in case you don't know, you might know this. Some of you movie people might know. The Enfield case was featured in The Conjuring 2. So, I mean, even if you didn't know it natively, you probably know it from The Conjuring 2. That made it really famous to a more modern audience. So, I know there's one other movie about it, and then there's probably some documentaries about it. I'm not really sure about the documentaries, but I do know there's at least one other movie about it. But The Conjuring 2 was excellent. It takes place in London, specifically Enfield, London, which is where the family lived. It was the late 70s, is what I want to say. I know it's the 70s specific as a general time frame, the decade of the 70s, but I want to say it was 77, 78, somewhere in there. I could be wrong, but it was in the 70s. Widely paranormal event. I mean, hugely paranormal. I mean, well, it was hugely paranormal, but it was also widely known as a huge event in the world. It was international in its attention getting. So everybody knew about this at the time. It was on TV. It was in talk show hosts. Saturday Night Live was probably making fun of it. It was big. And the reason it caught a lot of attention in the mainstream world, or part of the reason, the more quiet reason, is that the investigators and everybody that was involved seemed to be really credible. They were not going crazy. They didn't have a history of making shit up. I'm so glad this is an adult channel. It wasn't they weren't all wackos. So that was helpful, is that everybody seemed to be credible. We also had police, we had journalists, we had the clergy involved, and we had some really good paranormal investigators involved. So the evidence that we have may seem minor by today's standards, but that evidence includes audio recordings, voices and poltergeist activity. It also includes paranormal phenomenon or photographs. I'm sorry if I missed a word. Photographs of paranormal phenomenon and photographs of the physical evidence of things moving. So we've got quite a bit. The investigators that I like to highlight when I'm talking about this case are Maurice Grosse, who is a paranormal investigator, took tons of pictures, has tons of audio, and probably experienced some of the stuff along with the family. So he was a big one. The reason the scientific community really liked Maurice Grosse is because he used scientific methods for gathering his data. And maybe the data wasn't all that scientific yet, but he used scientific methods to gather his data, and so did
The other person, Guy Leon Playfair. I'm assuming his name is Guy Leon. I've never heard it pronounced. In French, it would be pronounced Guy Leon, but in English, it might be pronounced Guy Lion or Guy Leon. His last name is Playfair. He is a paranormal psychologist who evaluated the family, found them to be of sound mind. They weren't wackos. What he did find is they had a lot of stress. I mean, besides the paranormal, they just had a lot of stress. So, and because of his psychological background, he also collected his data in a very specific way, a very scientific way. So the mainstream really liked that. We also had, if we have to bring in some superstars of the world, Ed and Lorraine Warren were part of this investigation. A big part of the investigation, as they were a big part of the movie, a huge part of the movie. They were the stars. Well, they're still the rock stars of the paranormal world. They're both gone. Rest in peace. But they are the rock stars of the paranormal world. He was a demonologist who worked with the Catholic Church. She was a clairvoyant who was very sensitive to everything that went on around her, stuff that we could see and stuff that we couldn't see. Both were very Catholic, so take that into consideration as you read their stuff and investigate them themselves. But they did get a lot of information out of this case, good information that we can use. So quickly, we'll talk about stress management, stress and anxiety management. First, I want to include some of the physical symptoms because we all know that stress can come up physically, mentally. It can affect our relationships. It can affect our emotional well-being. It's a Hummer. We just don't want it in our lives. Unfortunately, we can't always avoid stress. Just like some of us who have anxiety disorder can't avoid anxiety, it comes up, it happens. How do we deal with it? That's the question. So first, if you don't have stress or anxiety or not aware of it, it can materialize at first with muscle tension, headaches, a feeling of being tired all the time or exhausted. Being anxious and stressed does kind of exhaust you. And it can also mess with your digestive issues. It can affect your appetite. It can do all kinds of things to you. So stress and anxiety are no joke. We want to take it seriously. It can also mess with your head, to put it comically, but it's true. It can impact our thinking, concentration, memory, decision making, all of that. It's all going to be there if you have stress, whether you like it or not. Even if you deny it, you're being affected by your stress, and it's not fun. So the interpersonal stuff could include arguing with your partner, arguing with your conflicts within your family. Interestingly enough, feelings of isolation, that you're the only one that's feeling all of this. So in my own experience, I have 5 people, including me, that live in this house. I'm never alone. I've always got somebody in this house. And there are days when my stress and anxiety are bad enough that I feel like that I'm the only one in the world and I'm managing everything. It's horrible. So briefly, we'll talk about some stress management techniques, and I'm sure in a further video I'll get deeper into them. But so stress management is one of those things. It's like that pill that the doctor gives you when he says, you have to wait 5 to 10 days for you to feel any effects of this because it has to get into your system. That's the way stress management techniques work, for stress and anxiety. You have to incorporate them into your lifestyle and take them and deal with them prophylactically, or they won't work when your stress and anxiety hit. So you really have to have this before. Start designing your plan now while you're calm, when you're not investigating, when you're not in a haunted house or anything else. Start it now when your life is at an even keel.
find things that you like to do. I like to talk about journaling. I like to talk about support systems, self-care, meditation, visualization, getting a professional team if you need to. We all need it at some point, so don't be afraid. Mental health is something to take seriously. So deal with your stress and anxiety. Let's handle that. So let's pretend we're going into a time machine and we got dropped off in the 1970s in Enfield, London. And we just met the Hodgsons, who are harried, stressed, weathered. They don't look good. Mrs. Hodgson is a smoker and her smoking has increased, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so what do you do? How do you prepare? Well, you're going to be preparing your equipment. We've got a ton of equipment nowadays that we can record all this stuff on, whereas Maurice Grosse and his ilk didn't have quite as much. They had audio recordings. They may have had some film if they were lucky, but they didn't have the stuff that we've got. You know, we've got trigger objects, we've got all kinds of stuff. So you want to make sure all of that works. Big thing is make sure you've got enough batteries, make sure you've got enough flash drives if you need them, some way to save your data. Have all of that on hand. You also want to make sure your sleep and nutrition are okay. We just came from the United States to London. You might need to catch up on your sleep. You might need to readjust your hours. Be cognizant that a lot of paranormal investigations happen at night. And if this one is happening at night, you might want to take that into consideration when dealing with your jet lag. It might be a good idea to be able to stay up at night, you know. Your nutrition, eat. Make sure you're eating. Try to make sure that it's good stuff that you're eating that's going to support your body. You really want your body to feel supported because you don't want to be dealing with issues in your body while you're dealing with the paranormal. So make sure you get your sleep and nutrition in and take care of yourself. The other one that I want to talk about is kind of a double standard in the world, in the paranormal world, is avoiding caffeine. We tell people to avoid caffeine because it makes you jittery, and it can make you nervous, which can bring on symptoms of stressing. They can mimic symptoms of stress and anxiety, if not bring them on. So the reason it's a double standard is, as I mentioned, a lot of paranormal investigators have investigations happen at night. And we need ways to stay awake because a lot of us work during the day as well. So we need to be able to deal with life at night. So you're going to see the coffee, you're going to see the energy drinks, you're going to see the energy shots. You know, you take it with a grain of salt, but also consider your own. I can't do the caffeine. So if your own system says don't do the caffeine, follow that. If you have a tolerance to it, it's at your own judgment, but you will see it. The biggest thing, huge thing that I want to talk, and I even risked my camera going in and out of focus for that, is have a stress relief plan before the investigation. Ideally, this is something that you've developed long before the investigation. But I want you to make sure that the stress relief plan includes something like deep breathing exercises, which I've covered in the last video. Visualization exercises, again, in the last video. The last video also covers grounding techniques. You want to include all three of those in your stress relief plan. That's huge, huge, huge. Second only to that, to the stress relief plan. And I know I put it out of order, but second only to that would be making sure your communication lines with your team are completely open. Make sure the walkie-talkies are working, make sure you've got cell phone coverage, and make sure you are using those regularly, even before the investigation. Call your team lead, establish a team lead if you need to. Make sure you've got somebody that everybody can go to for what's going on, and that person can broadcast that information out. So if you need to establish a team lead, do it. So those are the two biggest ones: communication and have a stress relief plan. During the investigation, you're in the house, you've set up your camera equipment, you're already sensing things that go bump in the night. You know, the hair on the back of your neck is standing up. You get that spidery, cobwebby feeling as you're going past some areas that some people say is a ghost touching you. Who knows if it is or not, but it's a common feeling. So what do you do in there? Well, you know, maybe you take breaks. Maybe that's something that you actually do talk to before, but maybe it's something you're doing in the middle. I mean, it's up to you and your team and how you work things out. But if you need to take breaks to break up the situation and break up the tension, please do it. Let somebody know. A lot of times these investigations happen in the nighttime when it's dark. You don't know where it's at. Sometimes they're isolated. You want to make sure you're safe. So take a buddy with you. He can help you with deep breathing exercises. And just take a break. Just talk. You know, have fun. Get a few laughs in. Then go back. Use your stress management techniques during your break. Breathing, deep breathing, grounding, visualization, talking to somebody. Those are going to be your friends. Have your open communication. You've got your walkie-talkie, you've got your phone. A rule that I see with a lot of paranormal investigative teams, including mine, is if the phone rings, if the walkie-talkie goes off, you answer it, because you never know if it's an emergency. That's the rule. You can deal with, you know, whether or not that was a good call later, but answer the phone. And the last thing I want to stress is it's perfectly, absolutely, completely fine to leave the investigation if you have to. If your stress and anxiety are excuse me, are inching up toward fear, or if you are well into fear and you're starting to feel overwhelmed, leave. Get out of there. And we have no problem with that. Everybody that I've met in a paranormal investigation has absolutely no problem with you saying, I've got to get out of here. They might send somebody with you only for safety reasons. Make sure you're okay. Make sure the neighborhood is safe. Make sure you get into your car okay, that you can drive. But if you're okay with, you know, if you are okay, if you really genuinely are okay, you can leave alone. It doesn't matter if you have to leave. That's the point. Leave. Do what you need to do to take care of yourself first. After the investigation, you've got all the photographs you need. You've got camera footage like you wouldn't believe. You've got EVPs. I mean, you've got audio recordings. You did a good investigation. What do? You've got home. We got in the time machine and we came back home. So decompress. Take a few minutes take a few days to decompress, not a few minutes. Just chill. Just relax. This was a major intense event, especially if you're at the Enfield house. I mean, the Enfield poltergeist case. You need some time to decompress. Take a vacation from your paranormal investigation. It's going to help with your data analytics and stuff. So talk to your teammates, see if they experience some of the same things. Process your emotions. If that involves talking to your teammates, then talk to your teammates. If that involves journaling, journal. If you need to meditate on it, meditate. Process those emotions. You probably had a lot of fear. You probably had a lot of stress. You may have had some anger, you know, if some things were going wrong. But you want to process all of those emotions before you go into your data. And always, after any kind of investigation, prioritize your self-care. That's the way you're going to feel that you yourself are supporting yourself. You can't you can't deny the self-care. It has to be there. So make sure that that's there and prioritize it. So quickly, I will talk about fear just for a few minutes because it's a little bit different than stress and anxiety. Fear is can be a flight or flight response, and often is in the paranormal. We often, if you have to go, it probably means you're fearful, and your instincts are telling you to get the hell out. Again, I'm glad this is an adult channel. I'm working on that too. So, fear is very common in the paranormal. Please don't think it's not. All of us have experienced it, and it can hit us physically and mentally. The effects of fear. We'll talk about the spectacular ones first. It triggers a cascade of several hormones into our system. The biggest ones being cortisol and adrenaline. You probably know all about those. It's all over the news these days. So cortisol is the typical stress hormone that they talk about. It increases energy. It suppresses the immune system temporarily. Don't think it's a permanent thing. It enhances focus. It raises your heart rate. It raises your blood pressure, and it can slow digestion. And there's probably a few other things that cortisol does to you. You don't want to stay in a soup of that. So it's really important to get that out of your system as soon as you can. Best way to get cortisol and adrenaline out of your system is to exercise, physical exercise. I know we hate it, but it's true. Go for a walk, go for a run, go to the gym and hit the weights. Do whatever it is you do for your exercise. That's the way to get rid of it. Adrenaline effects can mimic the cortisol effects. It can be bad. Adrenaline increases heart rate and blood pressure as well. It relaxes the airways for better oxygen intake so that when you're breathing hard, and also it can help you hyperventilate. So be careful with that. It sharpens the senses, enhances physical performance so that you can get the heck out of there if you need to, and it'll trigger sweating. So, again, this is a soup you don't want to stay in. Get rid of the cortisol and adrenaline. It's not pretty, and it can create some really bad effects in your body. So the paranormal and fear, just quickly, I'm almost done. I promise. I'm almost at the conclusion. The paranormal and fear kind of go hand in hand with a lot of people. It's something that addicts us really quickly. Those of us in the paranormal kind of like the thrill that we get from dealing with the paranormal. I think it started out as fear for a lot of us, and now it's just kind of a thrill adventure thing. And it also kind of fuels our curiosity. What are we dealing with? What are we dealing with? Is it something we got to worry about? These are thoughts that go through us all the time. So fears, it's a thing that we all experience. What we have to be careful of is because of the effects of cortisol and adrenaline, we're not falling prey to some false data that can happen. When you're at that level, you could maybe you saw a full-bodied apparition. Maybe you could even swear in a court of law that you saw a full-bodied apparition. But because you were in a very fearful state, we have to take that into question and consideration. And maybe it wasn't there. Maybe it was, but maybe it wasn't. We don't know for sure because you were too scared to really be reliable. That's what it is. So keep on top of that. The last thing is the conclusion, you guys. So I'm just going to wrap up here. We talked about stress, anxiety, and fear, and how they have a physical and mental effects in both everyday life and in paranormal investigations. So some of this stuff that happened in the Enfield case may have been caused by stress, anxiety, and fear, because the family was going through a lot already. The least of which was the fact that their house seemed to be falling apart around them and they had no way to fix it. So it's a major deal. these emotions manifest in various ways, and they can affect our bodies as well as our cognitive functions. So you really want to keep on top of them because you want a clear mind when you're dealing with the paranormal. And in any investigation, I would imagine, in anything that you're gathering data for, you want a clear mind. There are practical stress and anxiety techniques that are out there, and they're valuable tools for investigators as well. And take them with you. Take some of them with you. Although if you're dealing with, a destructive entity, you're probably not going to think about meditating. However, you can start taking some deep breaths. You can start visualizing some protection. You can also talk to a buddy, talk to a friend, make a quick exit to take a break, or just leave the situation. I think I have two things that I really want to invest in. I want to emphasize in this. I'm still very nervous about making videos. Can you tell? Is when you're dealing with the paranormal, please go in with a balanced mindset at the very least. Don't go in angry. Don't go in expecting to find anything. Don't, just keep an open mind. Be very mindful about that. Don't close it to anything. You don't know what you're dealing with. We really don't know what we're dealing with. So keep an open mind. Things might go differently than you expected. And stay curious. As I said, we don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know what it implies. We don't know what it means. We don't know how it's going to affect us. I mean, in the long run, we don't even know if it already is affecting us. Stay curious about it, but stay grounded. And keep exploring. I mean, we're onto something, so keep exploring it. Try to figure it out. I'd be curious to hear about what you discover as you're going through mindfulness and the paranormal. So again, subscribe, like, share, comment. Keep me in mind. Let people know. I really want to grow this channel, and I want to see where we can take it and how we can go with it with your feedback. So let me know. Keep me in the loop. And I'll see you next week. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here.